Yes,
Yes,
good
okay.
afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, nice to see you. Welcome to the first Meet the Expert live session of the e-course of the Asterousia Hybrid University. This course, as you know, combines asynchronous self-paced learning, which you do via the platform throughout the week, with synchronous learning, which is actually these Zoom calls that we will have every week. My name is Ziro. I am an education officer here at the Mediterranean Information Office, and I work at the Media Secretariat. We will be co-facilitating this Zoom meeting together with my colleagues, Olga, Vicky, and Simos. Before we start, I would like just some brief housekeeping notes. Note, first of all, on interpretation. As we told you, there is a simultaneous translation. This meeting is available in English and French language. So at the bottom of your screen, those who prefer to use the French language, they can click on the interpretation button and change the channel. One more note on recording. As we have already told you, it is not mandatory for the participants to follow this live meeting. So we are recording in order to make it available to the people that cannot be with us right now. But I'm very happy to see that already 66 participants are online. So this is very, very good news for us. To avoid background noise, please mute yourselves. And if you want to take the floor, please write us a message in the chat, and we will accompany that. Last but not least, in the platform so far, in the first week of the Asterousia Hybrid University, we have the possibility to ask questions our experts after watching their video lectures. So you can, of course, ask your own question relating to a video lecture that you follow, but also you can upvote questions of other people that you find relevant. We will now copy in the chat room the Slido link for this to be available to you. Without further ado, I would like now to introduce our experts for this first Zoom call, namely Professor Michael Scoullos. He's a professor of environmental chemistry at the University of Athens and director of the UNESCO Chair on Management and Education for Sustainable Development in the Mediterranean. He is the Mediterranean Information Office Chairman and the Medias Coordinator. He has worked for more than 40 years in environmental education and later on in education for sustainable development. He has been the scientific coordinator of all the previous summer universities. By the way, this is the sixth one, this hybrid form of the summer university. We have with us also Mr. Jonathan Baker. He is a regional science advisor and head of science unit at the UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe that is based in Venice. He has been working for 20 years with UNESCO and its MAB program, both at the global level and regionally in Latin America and the Caribbean, and now in Europe. I hope we have with us, hi, I hope we have with us also Amalia. I don't see her now, but she will probably log on later. Ms. Amalia Tavladoraki comes from Crete. She's head of the rural department, the Heraklion Development Agency, and she has a long experience in project management at national and international level.
She's there. She's there.
There, Amalia. Okay. Hi, nice to see you. She has been instrumental in the process of drafting the nomination folder of Asterousia as a Biosphere Reserve candidate. I don't know if you want to say just a few welcome words, the three experts, before we start.
Well, I start welcoming you. It's the first opportunity to have a real interaction. And we are here, I'm here for whatever questions. I have already a long list of questions, but you are welcome to come with more questions and challenging us if you wish. Also.
Can I speak? Jonathan?
Yeah, hi everyone. I just wanted to welcome everybody as well from on UNESCO's behalf. We're all very excited to interact with you this week and in the coming weeks. Unfortunately, my colleague Miriam that provided one of the presentations is not available today, but I'll try to cover everything you want to know and need to know about UNESCO, MAB, its processes, and everything else. Along with Michael, I think we should be able to cover most of the questions. But I've read the questions as well, and there's some that are quite challenging, and we might not be able to answer all of them either today, just because of the length of the session, and also because of the complexity of the questions. But I'm looking forward to exchanging with you.
And Amalia, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, good afternoon from Asterousia area, a Biosphere Reserve area. I'm glad to be here, and I'm really happy to see so many questions. It would be useful, though, to know to whom those questions are addressed to, and the way that we can answer them, or some of them. I hope we can answer a few of them today. And I'll be happy to contribute to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Amalia. Okay, in order to start, I propose to do a little bit of an energizer and see some reflections about your profile. So we have two polling exercises. I'm not sure if you can see it now in the screen. So our first question to you has to do with your relation to the Biosphere Reserve. So how do you relate to a Biosphere Reserve or other designated area? You can choose from the following options. You're a manager, a scientist or field expert, a farmer or local producer, a local entrepreneur, a teacher, a young activist or citizen. You come from a local group or association, or you don't really relate to any biosphere reserve or other designated area. I see about half of you have voted already. We will wait a little bit before we share the results. We are 75% of you have voted already. I think we can end this. So in this group, we have a lot of scientists and field experts that somehow do some monitoring or a science project in the field, but we also have managers, teachers, youth, citizens, associations, and a few people that do not really relate to biosphere reserves. And maybe we can ask one more question about you. sure if you can see the second one. You can see it now? Okay, as you know, this live meeting is complementary to the e-course that we have online and that you have been interacting with since Monday. So how do you find, how much have you progressed in the e-course so far? We have here 4 options. You haven't logged in the course so far, or you are in the progress of viewing and reading the material of week 1. You have already completed the reading or viewing material of week 1, or you're not actually in the course, you are an outsider and you just have the Zoom link and follow only this meeting. I see almost 90% of you have voted already. We wait a little bit more so that all of you can vote. So most of you are in the process of viewing and reading the learning content of week 1. We're very happy about that. And some of you have already finished the week 1 learning content. This is very, very encouraging for us. Okay, so without further ado, and coming back to your questions, maybe I can share my screen to the Slido. Mm-hmm. Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, so these are the questions, and I propose that we start with some reflections on the more popular ones. And I think that the more popular ones can be answered by all 3 experts. So one of the questions coming from Manal has to do with building trust. What are the best practices to build trust and to promote local communities engagement inside the BR? And maybe we can combine it with the third question from Maria Giannakaki, so you can reflect on both of them. How local people living in biosphere reserves will switch to sustainable practices, especially those that work on field and agriculture. I don't know which one of you would like to start on this.
I start, if you wish, and just to say that these questions are quite basic, important, and allow me to say that also a number of other questions could be answered together with this. So I may include what is the question by Agnello Aloia, what is also the question, partly the question of Lucy Dimitrova, of Chokri Mansour, and of Nina Lebar, as well as by Lucy Dimitrova of the 2nd of December, and partly of Luigi Puffozzi and of Pietro Beretta, and perhaps also of Allah Eldin Mahmoud. So all of them, and also of Manal Fauzi later question. All of them have to deal with the relationship of the local society with the Biosphere Reserve, its scope and understanding of what is all about, and how to involve people, and how to convince those that are not convinced or are indifferent. So in all these approaches, we need to combine, in my point of view, and from the experience we have from different areas, many elements. The two elements that need to come together to build trust is to use people that they trust. So some people from the local community that are well respected, not biased, and at least having some recognition by the community. This is one part to link you with the local conditions, so they see that the person who is there preaching is not someone from outside without knowing the region, but also bring together expertise, knowledge from elsewhere. So you need to have this combination always coming together, saying in different perhaps ways the same things, and co-creating with the communities the programs, discussing with them, and bringing to them good practices, good examples from other areas, analyzing also the difficulties and how the difficulties have been overcome, and showing how switching to better practices is something that creates also opportunities for them, wealth for them, and pride for them. So it is something that you have to do with a lot of knowledge, but in a humble way. You don't go there and start showing, that you know everything, that you have answer for everything, that everything will be perfect. So humble, but knowledgeable, bringing together local and expertise from elsewhere, and what you say, substantiate with good practices and examples from elsewhere. This as a general approach, and I stop here because, I mean, the co-creation is not just a word. Co-creation of the vision for the area, co-creation of programs for the area. And in this way, when you bring in also a powerful system that supports either regional or local, that could generate somehow resources to support these ideas, then you can convince people that you are going to make a difference. This is my first reaction. I guess that Jonathan may say more, or Amalia.
Yeah, I can try to complement what you said, Michael, but it was quite extensive. I think you've covered pretty much most of the points that I wanted to make. I think first of all, a key to building trust not only in Biosphere Reserves but in your everyday work is sort of consistency over a certain period of time. And so that's I think why, from the experience that I've had in the various regions that I've worked in, I think it's important to involve the key stakeholders from the beginning of the process. So local stakeholders that feel that they're part of something, bigger, that they're coming together with other stakeholders to create something. And based on common work together and a common understanding of where you want to go, and what kind of work you want to do within the site, then I think that trust is built, and things can work well at the local level. Obviously, that's theory. In practice, it's true that it can sometimes be complicated. You have different stakeholders with different priorities that may want to go in different directions. So but I think it's very important to try to build trust from the beginning, and try to, as Michael noted, try to bring in some examples of best practices that you can apply within this particular site, and experience that comes from before, that shows that these types, the Biosphere Reserves are sites where stakeholders can work together and work well together to accomplish common goals. Yeah, so I think that covers the trust part. I think, as Mike also said, Biosphere Reserves are bottom-up participatory sites. Even more than I would say than World Heritage sites, for example. Within the nature of Biosphere Reserves and also geoparks, there's the idea that the local participation is sort of a key aspect of the site management. It's within the the nomination file. You have to address that from the beginning now, and that's why we've gone through a whole review process as well of Biosphere Reserves to ensure that they are actually functioning as they should be according to the modern MAB rules and regulations that have been in place for the past 10 years or so. But maybe I'll stop there. There are a lot of sort of questions that go off of that. This is a very, very important question, the question of local involvement in Biosphere Reserves and how to create trust. And I think it's really is key to the success or not of the Biosphere Reserve, is getting that local buy-in from the beginning. Thanks.
May I add something? Well, I couldn't agree more with Mr. Scoullos and Mr. Baker. I would like to add my personal experience here concerning trust, because we've been working here for over 25 years, building trust with local people and communities. That means that it's not an easy, there's not an easy way to build trust in the local area, and it's different concerning the way people are or live in separate places, even in Crete. We are here, people from all over Mediterranean, so we have to take in mind that there's a different way to approach a Cretan and a different way to approach an Italian, maybe. But I think that the main, the basic word that builds a trust is always saying the truth to the people. And of course, being humble, as Mr. Scoullos said, we don't have all the answers, and we come to find them with you, because we have a common purpose, a common strategy with which we have planned together with you. That's the bottom-up approach. We sat with you, we discussed, we decided, and we proposed. That's how we worked for the proposal for the Biosphere Reserve. That's what we do over 30 years now with the LEADER project, which is a project that is financing rural areas through local action groups. And that experience was the basic one that helped us to build the trust and implement the same way of going to people and explain them what a Biosphere Reserve is and why is that important for our area. We have to talk to them about how this will help themselves, their profession, their family, their environment. It's all very basic for them, and the basic word is truth. We don't have all the answers, we'll find them together. Thank you.
Thank you, Amalia. I remember also from your video lecture that you stressed in the live session of the first phase of Asterousia Hybrid University this word, and I think it's, I agree with all of you that it's very important and it takes a long time to build, but it's crucial, and without this you cannot really move forward. I don't know, Professor Scoullos, if you want to, you have some favorite questions you would like to respond to, or you would like maybe to move to a second set of questions that have to do with, we have some questions regarding the COVID pandemic, and how do Biosphere Reserves respond to that? And if there is already some research regarding the pandemic. And also there is another interesting question about the COVID, that in this period we have learned to adapt to new lifestyles due to COVID. In some cases favorable to the environment. For example, teleworking or smart working. How can we make people remember these new habits after the pandemic is over? So I don't know which expert would like to reflect some thoughts on the pandemic.
I'm happy to take the first shot at it, just to mix up the order of responses. But this is something that that Miriam talked about in her presentation of kind of the new normal and a new approach for stakeholders within Biosphere Reserves following or in the COVID pandemic. How the COVID pandemic is, I mean, obviously it's impacted Biosphere Reserves as it's impacted everyone in very dramatic ways. Obviously from the health perspective to the economic perspective to the just an overall, you know, real impact on people's lives. And so so this is true. So there's one thing is how can Biosphere Reserves adapt to this new normal? So on the one hand, what are, in terms of sort of resilience, how can Biosphere Reserves and populations within become more resilient to these types of events? That's sort of one aspect of it. And the other aspect is how can we, as a group, sort of change the way that we live and the way that we interact with nature, and how can Biosphere Reserves sort of act as sites of excellence for that, of the new normal and new approach. So I think that the impact side of things, that one of the questions was laid whether this has been measured yet. And now I don't think there's been sort of a global measurement of this, either at the regional level. There's a few different surveys that have been undertaken by our colleagues in Paris related to COVID, and our regional bureau is going to undertake both a national survey in Italy and also a regional survey for Southeast Europe early next year, probably, to try to assess the impact of COVID on Biosphere Reserve. So we'll have that data and that information, but probably early next year. But I mean, the impacts are obviously, as I was saying, on the health side are been very high. On the economic side, also very high in terms of less jobs, less access to to possibilities for job creation, for wealth creation. I mean, that's something that goes across the board, but obviously applies to Biosphere Reserves. And the second aspect, which was touched upon by Miriam in her presentation, is how we can change. This is an opportunity for us as a MAB community to build on what we've been promoting for the past 50 years, because MAB has always been promoting sort of a sustainable approach to development, and has been a precursor to the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs in many ways. So how can we use this this unfortunate year and push ourselves to go even further than we've done before in trying to be sustainable and trying to live in harmony with nature, and trying not to also create these types of pandemics, because these pandemics, as well as climate change and other global events, are in part man-made. So how can we live in a different way so that we don't create these very serious impacts on our own lives? And I think so. We've developed that as a MAB, as the MAB Secretariat, and we're trying to sort of think that through with the rest of the MAB community, and trying to figure out different solutions of how to live differently and how to be able to be more resilient in the face of these types of events. And I know that at the Biosphere Reserve level, there's been quite a lot of work done as well to specifically sort of address that, to showcase some of the activities that have been done during this past year to become more resilient and to move forward in a different way within specific sites. But I think I'll leave it at that now and pass the floor to Michael and Amalia. And I'm happy to interact some more, because it's an interesting topic, and obviously something that we're all interested in exchanging on.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I have little to add. 3 points. One, indeed, we don't have yet the results or even a clear indication on impacts, apart from generalities that apply to all museums, sites, activities in general. But on the second point, Jonathan made is very important. The Biosphere Reserves have potential as learning laboratories, and the educational messages we combine either with the presence of people in Biosphere Reserves or getting outside the Biosphere Reserves, and promoting a different, softer, nature-based solutions approach is gaining more importance now, because the COVID pandemic and similar, I don't know how many of you know that we have a man-made, almost man-made disease several times every year, 4 times a year. Of course, it's not the same, the scale, because it is not so dangerous and not easily pass from one to another person. But it is not that it is unique, this COVID. We have several attacks of this kind. And the more zoonoses we have, the way in which we produce meat and we produce different types of food has already, it is proven that it has a clear impact on the frequency of these problems. So going back to a Biosphere Reserve approach, not saying that this approach can be done throughout the universe to address all kinds of problems, but recognizing that this is a model that could answer, could prevent, and provide precautionary approaches is a useful thing to say at this moment. I think this is the most important role of Biosphere Reserves at this moment with COVID. And we have what it was asked by one of you, how we can keep and remind people in 2, 3, 4 years' time after the crisis that we have to take this kind of softer approaches. It is something on which we need to work more. So this is all what I wanted to say. The third thing, because I said 3, the third thing is if through this crisis, we can track the support of governments and governance schemes at regional and national and local level to support more biosphere reserves in their role. So these are the 3 things I wanted to elaborate a little bit more. They are all in full agreement of what Jonathan presented first. I don't know if Amalia wants to add something.
Well, I'm not an expert at yourselves, but as a citizen, and I think we all can see that we will have a pre-COVID period and a post-COVID period. Our life won't be the same. Teleworking or smart working, I think it's here to stay, and we remain to see. But I think that governments are changing the way, at least the way of thinking, at least on the matter of mobility and working. So I think we'll have many changes after COVID periods that will be helpful for the environment generally, not only biosphere reserves areas. Thank you.
If I may say something, Amalia, if you think that we will work more from our desks from home, we'll need even more the biosphere reserves. After sitting inside, we want to go out and meet nature, have the opportunity to see nice landscapes and have a contact with nature even more.
Yeah, that's very true. We have learned to walk more nowadays than using our car. So it will be a nice opportunity to use biosphere reserves only for, you know, rest our minds and enjoy nature. So you're absolutely right.
Thank you all for this. And I think all your reflections relating to the COVID and how we adjust from now on, also in a kind of response in the question of Ms. Yanakaki on how to convince those working in the sector of agriculture, for example, on how to convince them towards more sustainable practices, because I think that the people that work in agriculture are the first ones that are impacted by the loss of biodiversity, the impacts of climate change. They can see it in their local products. So I think that if things are discussed with them in a trustful manner, as we said before, that things can improve also in this dimension. And the whole planet has seen what the impact of COVID. We have all felt it in our lives. And I think this is an opportunity also for the agricultural sector to adjust in a way. So I would also like your response now to questions regarding periodic review. So we had some questions. I think Jonathan is the one that should reply in this group of questions. For example, how the periodic review is done. How do you evaluate the functioning of the Biosphere Reserve regarding the efficient and effective way of its operation? What are the scale, the parameters? And there was another question about the time, if the time of 10 years for review is considered too long or too short, why this period was chosen. And there was one more question by someone asking that what do you do in cases where a biosphere reserve is not doing so well? So do you support this biosphere reserve in improving and bringing it back in the right track?
All right, thank you very much, Ido, for the series of questions which I had seen as well. And yes, so periodic reviews are a very important part of the life of biosphere reserves. I just wanted to point out first that that there's a requirement at the statutory level at the global level for biosphere reserves to do a periodic review every 10 years. I completely understand the point made by one of you related to the fact that that's a long period of time, and there are actually quite a few countries that have decided that they will ask their biosphere reserves to do a review, a midterm review, so after 5 years, and so that's a little bit shorter of a period, and I think is something that should be encouraged at the national level and at the biosphere reserve level. So the second point is sort of related to what is being reviewed. So it's there's a form which is similar to the nomination form, not quite the same, but we're looking at a lot of the same elements that we look for in the nomination form. So first of all are the three functions of the Biosphere Reserve being implemented correctly? So we're talking about economic development, biodiversity management, and then the aspect of education, training, etc. So that's the key part. And then you sort of, you go down and look at a lot of different, in much more detail in these different areas. To basically see whether the Biosphere Reserve is functioning according to the, to the guidelines that have been put in place. And I'd like to bring to your attention, in fact, that these past 2 years, and this applies not only to the review process, but it applies to basically everything that has to do with Biosphere Reserves. These past 2 years, the member states have tasked a group to work on technical guidelines for biosphere reserves, and these technical guidelines address many of these different questions that you've had, not only with regard to sort of the review process, but also the nomination process, the size of a biosphere reserve. I know there was one question related to that. And a lot of these questions you'll be able to answer looking at this document, which is called the Technical Guidelines, which has just been reviewed by the MAB Council this past month. So you can access the document, which is which is related to the technical guidelines. It's a big document. It's about 100 or 200 pages long, and relates to a lot of these different issues related to the nomination procedure, related to the review process, related to the management of biosphere reserves. So a lot of these sort of basic questions, but very important questions that were sometimes not that clear just with the old statutory framework. So I would encourage you to go on the MAB website and go to the MAB Council website, the last MAB Council, and look at the technical guidelines that have been put on there. And the idea is for these technical guidelines to be uploaded online and to become a sort of a live document. What's interesting about the document is that it not only sort of indicates answers to some of those questions, but it also gives you examples of biosphere reserves that have either done the nomination procedure correctly and shows different cases where they've done so, or the management part, or the review process. So it's really a quite useful document that I would encourage everybody to take a look at. So maybe I'll stop there. I know maybe Michael and Amalia maybe have a more precise, well, let's say more precise information about actually going through a periodic review process, so they can give you some more details in that regard. But as far as the UNESCO MAB Secretariat goes, I think that's sort of the basic information I want to pass across, and also to tell you about those technical guidelines, which are really a useful document for everybody who's interested in biosphere reserves and wants to get some of these basic questions answered to take a look at.
Well, I just want to, first of all, confirm that the document mentioned is a must for those who want to prepare, propose, or whatever, prepare a file for the nomination. But on the review itself, I would like to say that it's extremely useful tool. I know that because in Greece we had for years, and we still have Olympus and Samaria, two biosphere reserves of the first generation, very, very early nominated. And at that time, the emphasis was on protection, on conservation. Although from the beginning we had the three zones, the country itself, Greece, didn't put any emphasis on the third zone, the transition zone. And because of the review, the government was obliged, and the local authorities and others, to review the status and add the zone or amend the zone according to the requirements. Because we have the requirement as such, many times even local communities or others tend to postpone arrangements that are somehow difficult or whatever. So the review is something very useful, and it takes time, so we cannot review every 3 years. Perhaps every 5 years, yes. But in fact, is a serious process that requires, again, some kind of consultation, some kind of reconciliation between different groups that have, during the period of time, they find some time of modus vivendi, and during the revision, you reopen some of these issues. So the revision is not an easy thing. It's something that sometimes reopens the, you know, the basket of concerns. So it is a positive thing. It should not be done too frequently. And
your microphone. Your microphone, we don't, okay, we missed only the last sentence of Professor Scoullos.
okay.
Only the last one.
No, I said that this sometimes is very useful for either difficult or lazy administrations to move to the right direction.
Yes, a self-check tool to improve. Okay, next question. I remember some questions in the Slido, and I see it also in the chat. Maybe we can discuss a little bit about the nomination process. Of course, Jonathan explained that also in the video lecture. So I would advise everyone to go back also to the video lecture and see exactly explain the nomination process. But as we have some questions, maybe we can talk a little bit about that. And there was another Slido question asking for a tip, all of you. If someone had this idea, thought that their site was one to be that should join the World Network of Biosphere Reserves, what would you advise him to do first? So I don't know who wants to take it.
I'm happy to jump off from the general, and then we get to the more specific with Michael and Amalia. But in terms of the nomination procedure, it's true that I spoke about the part, let's say, once the nomination gets to the Secretariat, but the longest part of the process is actually the preparation of the file, which both Michael and Amalia can attest to. I mean, it can last from, depending on how much experience within a country of nominating biosphere reserves. If it's a first biosphere reserve within your country, it could be a 2, 3, even 4-year process to make sure that you're getting all the different stakeholders involved, educating all the different local players about what it means to have a biosphere reserve. So it's a relatively long process if it's done right, and it's done so that the biosphere reserve is going to be a sustainable site, and to make sure that all the different stakeholders have been consulted and that there's buy-in for this biosphere reserve to be successful. Then the nominating procedure after that is relatively straightforward. It's less than a year long process. It's the dates, at least it used to be the dates. I'm not quite sure where we are with this anymore, but let's say in the early fall, you get the nomination that goes to the MAB Secretariat, so from the member state. And the MAB Secretariat reviews this, pass it on to the expert committee that looks at that early the next year. They pass on a recommendation to the MAB Council, which meets usually in June of that second year, and takes a decision vis-a-vis whether or not the site is going to be admitted to the network. So from September to June is the process once the file arrives at the UNESCO Secretariat. Let's see, what was the other question is related to how to jumpstart or how to initiate this nomination process. So it can be done in many different ways, but there has to be an interest from some key stakeholder that's ready and willing and able to push the nomination file forward. So it can start off with, from a scientific study. It can come from the scientific community. It can start off, from an NGO that wants to find a way to protect and to have a sustainable area in the area that they're in. It can start off with local authorities as well. It can start off at the national level sometimes. But then after that, what you need is somebody as a key actor, as again, Michael and Amalia can attest to, who's going to push this nomination file forward, because it's quite an effort. So you have to have, first of all, I think 1 or 2 key players that are ready to invest quite a bit of time in that, and then the ability to bring lots of other stakeholders together. But I'll let Michael and Amalia maybe speak to that at the Biosphere Reserve level.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I just want to say 1 or 2 words on the previous question, because the revision does not always give a good result. And we have many sites that lost actually their status. I don't want to mention, not in Greece, but in other parts of the world. So this is something that we have to keep in mind, and this is a real tool in the hands of the Secretariat and UNESCO to actually put things in order. Now, this has to do with the nomination also, because we need from the beginning to make clear to everybody that what we are trying to do is something that is a positive thing, is something that is an asset that might be lost if we don't follow that from the beginning. So we need to, from the beginning to approach people saying, look, if this can be lost, now it is going to be gained. So are you going to help in order to gain something? And what is to gain is when you start like that, then there are few people that oppose because they understand from the beginning that you are trying to obtain something, to achieve something with the nomination. So to start the whole process, whoever is the driving force needs to bring together three components: the local community, a knowledgeable or someone who can bring the knowledge about the area, so either academia or a consultant that is going to be paid by someone, and definitely the local authorities, because the local authorities will sign, and the map committee of the country. If the national committee is not in favor of something and they don't support it, they don't advise how this is going to be done, you cannot actually, because at the end of the day, the application is submitted through the MAP committee, and actually not even the MAP committee goes to the national UNESCO commission. So all these steps need from the beginning to be secured. So to have local agreement for that, not only the citizens, but also the authorities. That means important preliminary work. What Jonathan mentioned is true. In Greece, for example, we have other three areas. In one of the applications, we didn't manage to get through. It was not approved by the council in the MAP Secretariat, the Scientific Council. Why? Because we didn't manage to prove that there will be a sustainability in the governance of the area. That was Samothraki, which is by excellence the place that should become a biosphere reserve. But we couldn't have this because there is only one community there, and they didn't have the resources to have the necessary governance. So all these are very important. And in Asterousia, and I leave this for Amalia to explain, we were very rapid. First, because the committee, the MAP committee, had experiences from other areas. We have the Parnon areas, and we worked there for 4 years already. We have other areas we worked for 2 or 3 years to obtain the necessary conditions. In Asterousia, we moved very fast. First, because the people were eager to and keen to support it, but this was thanks also to the governance schemes existing there and the development agency of the area, which took it, you know, the ownership was there from the beginning. So I leave it at this point, and perhaps Amalia will say more.
Well, for us, it took almost 2 years. Is that right, Mr. Scoullos? 2 years to be able to submit our proposal for the Asterousia area to be nominated as a Biosphere Reserve area. And for us, it was the regional authority that came to our local action group, our development agency, and asked for our help because we were local authority at which had all the trust that I was talking to you about before between the local communities, the citizens, and the local authorities. So they asked for our help. We received funding from the region of Crete to pay a consultant that would have all the scientific part to make the proposal about why the Asterousia area can be a biosphere reserve area. So it was very good, a very good study there. And then we went to local communities which they agreed to that effort. And we have a written agreement by them. We also get in touch with a management body of protected area, which is at national authority level. And of course, we couldn't have done anything without the support of Mr. Scoullos and the MAB office and the national office of UNESCO at Athens, that step by step they were there for us, giving us advice, giving us bad examples that we should avoid, and help us make the local committee, which was the thing that was missing from Samothraki. And but we are ready to propose and make that local committee done in Asterousia, because we have all that experience through the development agency. So we managed to submit the proposal, and I had no idea, Mr. Scoullos, that in other areas needed 4 or 5 years. And for me, 2 years was too long. So it's good to know that it was soon enough. But I think from now on, it's the hard part, because we always have in mind what Mr. Scoullos said, that we can be nominated once, but we can be denominated. So we have to try and our best to stay a MAB area. So I think that's the hard part, and but we are in a good way, aren't we, Mr. Schuloz? We have already a plan.
You are very well placed, I can assure you.
Thank you. The good thing is that through Leader Project, I was talking to you about at the first, is giving us the money that are needed to implement infrastructures, workshops, learning courses at the area, and make the people understand the benefits of the nomination. And it's a process, ongoing process. And for the time being, we have the money to do that. So that's a huge advantage for us. Thank you.
I don't know if anyone else would like to comment on the resources and the funding of BRs, because I saw 1 or 2 questions also in the Slido regarding the funding process. Maybe Jonathan?
I'm happy to comment on the funding process, but that's basically something that happens at the national level and at the BR level. What the MAB Secretariat is looking at in the nominations and at the periodic reviews is to make sure that the site is acting in a sustainable manner, so that it does have the resources, whether it be financial, but also in-kind people that are involved at all different levels, and that the Biosphere Reserve is functioning as it should. Obviously, it's a bit easier to function if you do have the necessary resources, and that's why Asterousia also is a very promising case because of the involvement of the different levels, both local and the regional government, and that have been there from the beginning and have supported the site. So, but every biosphere reserve functions differently, and tries to find funds for different for the functioning itself of the biosphere reserve, whether it comes from the national level, that's the case in many countries, or some have been also supported by the private sector. There are some biosphere reserves that are actually managed by private sector entities and get their funding that way. So there's not a requirement of where the money should come from or how much money you need to have for a biosphere reserve. It's just that they need to function in a sustainable manner. And there are lots of different, MAB gives a lot of flexibility to the countries and also to the committees and to the biosphere reserves, so they can find innovative ways to make the biosphere reserves sustainable.
Okay, if Professor Scoullos does not have to add anything, I think we are covered with.
There is one thing. As Jonathan said, we have a variety of ways to finance a biosphere reserve. The best way is to have a basket of contributions, and not necessarily get into the hands of the governing body of the Biosphere Reserve, but to create a series of opportunities. So the series of opportunities also to the private sector, to small businesses, to the branding of the products, all these things create opportunities of sustainability for the area. So it is, even if you have a lot of money from one source, it is good not to have a monoculture of funding. You need to find different ways. So different activities may be financed by different organizations, sources, so that if for one or another reason, one source of funding is getting less or stops for whatever reason, there is sustainability in the system. And this requires some kind of a strategy, and at the same time, the understanding of the people that they should not lose something. But so this is in a dynamic relationship with all what we said until now. Funding comes with ownership, and ownership comes with understanding and appreciating and seeing the results. So you need to show some lower hanging fruits you collect first to show the success. And this is something that we need a strategy, even among the managers of biosphere reserves. We need this kind of exchange of experiences on how we can provide this kind of incentives at the end of the day, because I insist that we should not rely on one single way for the sustainability of the biosphere reserve.
Thank you. This is very useful. Now, we have 20 more minutes. Maybe you have time for 1 or 2 more questions. You can also put them here in chat in case you want to ask something specific. Okay, I have two questions from Slido now. The first one is if you have a special biosphere reserve that what's your favorite one and why you think it is very successful? This is for all of the 3 of you. in case you have a favorite biosphere reserve. And a second, more provocative question, I'm sorry to ask, but it comes it has happened to me in informal discussion, so I take this opportunity to pose this question to you. When we meet someone and we explain what the Biosphere Reserve is, how do we make them understand that the Biosphere Reserve is different, how it differs from a protected area, and what points we should stress in this discussion? I don't know who would like to.
Jonathan, are you starting first, or shall I start?
Sure, I'm happy to go. You can go first.
Okay,
Either way.
go.
All right. So, well, let me start with the second question, which I don't think is that controversial. I think from the beginning, biosphere reserves have been defined differently than protected areas. You just need to look at first of all, the zonation, which has a protected area within the overall zonation, but then you have two other zones, the buffer, two other areas, the buffer zone and the transition zone. So you're basically looking at sort of different levels of protection. For the central part, the core zone is often a protected area in national legislation, and then the buffer zone, where you have different activities that are probably more related to research and education going on there, and then the transition zone, which can have relatively strong economic activity going on in the transition zone that are sustainable in nature. So just looking at the zonation, you see that there's a difference. And then looking also at the three functions of biosphere reserves, you see there again that there's one function that's related to conservation and related to biodiversity, and then two other functions that are related to both the economic aspect and then the research and training and awareness raising. So biosphere reserves are sites now, we define them as sites for sustainable development. So we're looking at much more than protected areas look at. We're looking at all the 17 SDGs. We're looking at Agenda 2030. We're looking at trying to move forward, I mean, on the 3 or 4 different legs of sustainable development, depending on how you define them, the economic, the social, the environmental, and UNESCO has added the cultural leg to sustainable development. So it's kind of a broader and more inclusive development mechanism than protected areas. It's a different concept. So I think I hope that helps a little bit in explaining the difference between the two. And the first question, can you remind me? Sorry, now I've gone off on the second question, and I forgot what the first one was.
Do you have a favorite biosphere reserve?
The favorite.
Which one would it be? Why?
No, I don't want to give any favorites. I think there are lots. That's the interesting thing that we've done with the website now, and that also was done by the Spanish Bio Committee, is looking at all these different examples of biosphere reserves and how they apply the SDGs. Also looking at all the different Proud to Share videos. You see there's, I think close to 100 Proud to Share videos where you see the richness and the different ways of approaching being a biosphere reserve, even though it's, we've asked the same questions, so that people are answering the same questions, but you can tell the diversity and the amazing work that's being done in multiple biosphere reserves across countries and across regions. So there's really interesting work being done at the national level. Maybe I can highlight, some of the transboundary biosphere reserves is another interesting, interesting format for biosphere reserves, and not only bringing the intricacies of one country in play, but also working with one other country or sometimes two in the same biosphere reserve. So there you're going even beyond what biosphere reserves do at the national level. So you're promoting peace and promoting understanding between two different countries, sometimes in areas which have had quite a bit of conflict in the past, which is the case in Latin America. There are a couple of transboundary reserves there that are very, were conflict areas for many years, and because of the designation, there's been sort of an evolution towards a more peaceful relationship between different countries even. So it's because of the variety of biosphere reserves, it's difficult to pick one, especially I'm not going to pick one from the Secretariat's point of view, but they're really the variety of biosphere reserves and the strengths that different biosphere reserves have that are very different from one another is what makes this network such an amazing network. So I'll leave it at that. Maybe Michael will pick some favorites.
I will not, although I have the Asterousia almost. I'm like a father of a baby, so I feel a little bit connected to that more. But I don't also in my country, Olympus and Samaria are great places with strengths, and there is no comparison. All of them, as Jonathan says, is difficult to choose. It's just a matter of personality sometimes. But I want to say something about the other question. And we have addressed that in the Euromab meetings several times. Our name, because there is a question also about the name man in the biosphere has some problems. Human, man, why man, not woman, or whatever, first part, and why biosphere reserve, biosphere and reserve. These two words are somehow are identified with conservation of biosphere reserve, of protected area, and the sustainable development narrative is not there. We have decided, because it was put to us several times, to keep the name because of the tradition, because of the visibility that has already. It does not, the name alone does not provide the full message of what these areas are. And we know that. So we have from the beginning to start by saying the name does not necessarily portrays the content, and the content is sustainable development. So we need to recognize that and give from the beginning the explanation that Jonathan gave. Even in some of the older literature of MAB, this is not so clear. We need recently, with linking it with SDGs, it has become more and more clear that these areas are not only for the protection. The protection is an important part, but protection through sustainable development and for sustainable development. And this is why it is man and the biosphere. So this is the link with sustainable development. The man is first, man and biosphere. So that is very important to explain when you are when they ask you, as you said, Iro, and you have to make this analysis. I think it is convincing.
So we keep the name.
We keep the name. We like the tradition. We keep the name and we explain.
Exactly.
This is why we have man first.
Yes.
And we start with that.
I don't know, Amalia, should I ask you what is your favorite biosphere reserve? I think it's a rhetoric question.
Well, it's my first and my only one. It's Asterousia area, but I would really like to see a good practice from somewhere else around the world that can give us ideas for our area. That would be great for us, I think. And I would like to add that when we first started to communicate with people at Asterousia area, explaining to them that we're trying to nominate the area as a MAB area, the first reaction was negative because they thought that there would be a new zonation with new restrictions for their villages, for their businesses, etc., and that would be something negative for them. We try to explain them what Mr. Scoullos said, that man is very important for that nomination. That has to be in equivalence with the environment and the sustainable development of the area. Step by step, they seem to understand that. And I'm happy to say that they are now asking, come to our offices and ask if they can have the map with the zonation of the area. So because they want to invest at the area and they want to have in mind the zonation of map. That's very good for us, and that means that they seem to understand that map is a brand name, a good one, as long as the UNESCO is with it also, and it would be great for them and their businesses to have it together. I don't know how to explain it more. It's not a new restriction. It's not a new way of putting things harder for them, making things harder for them. It's something that will give them sustainability for their areas, more opportunities for jobs, a better brand name for their products. And I think we are in a good way, but we sure would like to learn more from other biosphere reserve areas around the world.
I have to say something that we gained a lot in the Greek map community from the summer universities of the past and our visits to Sardinia and Bulgaria, but also to the exchange we had all these years. So also people coming for the Parnon summer school with experiences from the Po Biosphere Reserve, from other biosphere reserves. And I think one of the purposes, the main purposes of this university is actually to show people how to approach the Biosphere Reserve at all levels. And this has created also opportunities for many people who attended previous summer universities to get involved professionally with the nominations and preparation of files and all this kind of thing. So keep that in mind, that this is a process. And also I wanted to inform, it is very new, Amalia, that we have discussions with biosphere reserves in Italy and elsewhere who are interested to be twins with Asterousia and others. So there is already some, also thanks to the university, some kind of interest on Asterousia from other biosphere reserves. So this is also part of what jointly with the UNESCO office in Venice have in mind when we organize these things.
Well, thank you, Professor. And to respond also to the comment of Amalia. Amalia, we have two more weeks. In the next week, we will talk more about branding and communication strategies. And I think you will be able to get some ideas from the lectures that we have. And in the third week, when we combine education and youth-led initiative, also from there you will get some ideas. And also in third week, we discuss this resistance that is not something that happens only to you. It's something common that things need to be explained to see the BR as an opportunity. I'm very happy that still 80, 90 participants are online. They followed the entire Meet the Expert session. Please keep asking your questions in the Slido each week. Try next week, we focus on communication and branding. So please ask questions, focus your questions around these two topics, address them to lecturers. And in the third week, we will discuss more on education. I don't know if there's some specific questions that you would like to reply. We can do that in writing after our Zoom call. Last thing I would like to ask everyone, as this was not so interactive with you, maybe you can write us in chat a word or phrase, a takeaway message that you have after this first session. We will be happy to read that. Feelings, thoughts, or and one last thing, we have one more minute. I would like to ask you to switch on your camera so that we can see your faces and take a group photo. If that is okay with you. Oh, nice. After all these black screens, it's nice to see you. Function print screen. Yeah. So see you next week, and see you online on Monday when we launch the second week content. Okay? Bye-bye.